Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of In the Sheets. This episode is very, very exciting for me because I have my beautiful naturopath Hannah on with me, and we're going to be discussing birth control and all of the effects that it can have on our bodies. So, just to give you a bit of a rundown about Hannah, Hannah completed her Bachelor of Health and Science in Naturopathy 5 years ago, and since then has treated hundreds of women focusing on hormonal imbalances, PCOS, endometriosis, and fertility. Her and her husband Connor started their own health clinic a few years ago, Sprout Natural Health, specializing in women's health. So, welcome to the podcast, Hannah.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I'm really excited to have you on. For those of you listening, Hannah has been my naturopath for almost 2 years now, I think. It's been a while now.
Yeah, definitely.
So I literally couldn't think of anyone better to bring on for this topic. I know I've shared my own journey with coming off of the pill and birth control on my podcast before, but I've had a lot of questions from a lot of my listeners about, if they could have a bit more of a rundown about that sort of process. So I thought you would be the perfect person to have on because you clearly have the expertise in this area.
Yeah, for sure. And I treat lots of women, as you know, obviously a lot of women come and see me for hormonal imbalances or problem with fertility after coming off the pill, post-pill acne, things like that. So yeah,
I love
definitely.
that. Well, let's
Yeah.
get right into it. I've got some questions for you, which a few of them have come from some of my listeners. So I would love to just really dive into those.
Yeah, for sure.
So mainly to just get it started, can you give us a basic rundown of how the pill actually works?
Yeah. So basically with the pill, there's lots of different types of pill, just to mention to begin with. So your most common pill that women are prescribed by most medical doctors or gynecologists, they normally contain two different synthetic steroid hormones. So these steroid hormones are very different to what we naturally produce as a woman. So so basically what they do is they aim to suppress your natural hormonal balance or your natural hormonal production so that we don't have an unexpected or unwanted pregnancy, for example, or to help control certain symptoms or hormonal symptoms.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, which is why a lot of people I feel like have that saying, well, they go on the pill to make their cycles more regular.
Yeah. Or and this is the thing with the pill. I mean, something that I've realized over the years is a real lack of knowledge or, has never really been taught to most women is that when you go on the pill, it's, and doctors will say it's to regulate hormones. It's really not, because it's actually suppressing your hormones. It's not regulating them. So yeah, I mean, that's an issue in itself, but also bleeds, for example. So a lot of women will go, oh, but they get their cycle once a month, as as it should be, but their actual bleed that they're getting with the pill isn't their actual period. It's a breakthrough bleed. So so there's just a general lack of education, I guess, around what the pill actually does and the potential side effects of it as well. So yeah, so that's sort of a little brief overview. It's a lot more complicated than that, I guess, and there's so many different types of hormonal contraceptives, but just as a broad picture, that's sort of a little recap, I guess, of what most women end up going on to is the general pill.
Mm. Do you think that sort of lack of knowledge and awareness and just that general, you're having sex now, or you're 16, we'll just get you on the pill, or you've got endometriosis or PCOS, we'll just put you on the pill to regulate your period. Do you think the general misconception around that and the lack of awareness and the lack of choice that women have is probably why you went into specializing in women's hormones and fertility?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. To be honest, like I went into naturopathy just because I was generally interested in natural health, just to be honest. But what I found is specifically over the last few years of treating and just seeing the lack of education and just the amount of women that come in so embarrassed because they don't understand how their own body works. It's really frustrating. Being a woman myself, I was put on the pill when I was about 15 or 16. And that was just, I didn't know any better at the time. I don't remember ever being informed about potential side effects or about what it's actually doing in my body. I was just told, oh, you're at the age now where you go on the pill. And I just listened to the doctor. So I went on to it. But I guess the answer to that question is I've definitely flourished in that area. I've developed quite a big interest in how the pill works and how to actually regulate your hormones naturally outside of the pill, just from seeing the side effects that I do see in clinic, as well as the amount of women that are so misinformed. So yes, just a little bit of a passion for me is women in this area.
I love that. And you mentioned side effects a few times there, which I know you and I have worked we've worked together quite a lot with side effects that I had coming off of it. But
Yeah.
could you maybe talk about a little bit of some of the side effects or the ways that the pill can negatively affect our bodies by being on it?
Yeah, for sure. So look, with the pill, there are a range of potential side effects. It really, some of them really vary. So some of them are much more major than others. So we'll start with some of the more major ones, which would be an increased risk of breast cancer. That's quite a concern as far as I'm concerned, with being put onto a medication and not being informed that there is a risk in potential breast cancer. So with the pill or with the common pill, it's actually listed as a type 1 carcinogenic. So to me, that's a pretty big red flag, or at least women should be informed that that's a possibility, that there is an increase in that risk. Other than that, though, again, it can be quite serious, but blood clotting is very common. It's a little bit more of a known side effect, not by all women, but it is a little bit more known. So yeah, another little potential side effect there. Other things that are, again, they can be more serious depending on the severity, but something I see quite a lot in clinic is mood imbalances. So depression is a really big one. So I have a lot of women that come and see me and they might even be on the pill and have no idea that it's linked. But as soon as we actually discuss the possibility of just trialing to see how they go with their moods when they don't have that synthetic hormone going into their body, it's incredible. Honestly, within a month, 2 months, we generally notice some changes. So, a lot of women, especially in that area, if they go and see a doctor, they're most likely going to be recommended to go onto an antidepressant, which then comes with a whole nother host interactions and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely something that I do tend to visit with clients. If they do come and see me for mental health conditions and they're on the pill, I'll definitely, make them aware of the research that's there now that does pinpoint that depression and mood imbalances can definitely be linked in with the oral contraceptive pill. Other than that, though, some of the more minor ones, but are still things that we should be made aware of, is loss of libido. So obviously we're flatlining hormones. So your body's not thinking about reproducing when there's no hormone. So often that libido does drop. Another few things that I see, metabolism issues. So weight gain or fluid retention is very common. Hair loss is another one that I do treat regularly as well. And then, just some issues with breakthrough bleeding if the body's starting to reject the pill.
Yeah, I love that. I think definitely that reminds me a lot of the time when I first came to see you when I was wanting to come off. Like I had zero libido. I feel like I was tired all of the time and I had so much fluid retention. So I definitely was in that boat with those side effects. And I definitely noticed when you helped me come off of the pill, the first thing that I noticed was that I lost 4 kilos within 3 weeks of just fluid retention. And yeah,
it's inflammation and fluid retention half the time. But sorry, going.
and which was pretty amazing. I thought that was a huge difference. And I just remember my libido was always quite high, and then after being on the pill for so many years, it was just completely non-existent, not even there. It would be negative 100. And I just remember as well talking to you. I think it was our first appointment back after I'd come off the pill, and my libido was just so much higher, like infinitely higher. It was like within, I think, 3 or 4 days of not taking the pill, it was like, oh, is this what it feels like to be aroused again? Like, this is insane.
Yeah, it's so true. And I hear it all the time from so many women. It's one of the most common side effects or just causes of the pill. And it's like I was explaining earlier, it's flatlining your hormones. So without that natural progesterone secretion, testosterone secretion, and estrogen secretion, your libido would just be on the floor. So yeah, so that's where that sort of comes into play.
Yeah, I love that. And do you usually notice a lot of trends with these side effects in the patients that you see? Like it tends to be the same problems with each patient?
Look, it's not always exactly the same. Everyone's so individual. I do think it really plays a role with things like genetics as well. So I know we've spoken about it briefly before, but some women are more estrogen dominant, just genetically anyway. So they're more prone towards estrogen dominant conditions. And that might be potentially, like, for example, more prone towards the side effects that are more serious with it, where there might be endometriosis or potential breast cancer, scares, things like that. So yeah. So, I mean, not necessarily, no, like people don't come in with the exact same symptoms, but they definitely come in with a similar picture. So like we were saying, libido, some of the minor, I guess, side effects are quite common. So yeah, so things like the hair loss even is actually quite a common one too. The loss of libido, the mood imbalances is a really big one as well. I hear that a lot from a lot of women. But I guess more of the major ones is what I'm trying to say aren't as common, but still definitely, yeah, has happened. And I've seen it in clinical practice as well.
Yeah, it's a bit concerning, isn't it? Just like how many people it is affecting. And it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
really ties back into that lack of education.
It does, unfortunately. And this is what really gets me. I mean, like as a woman myself, I feel like we deserve the right to actually be educated from a school age. You know, when we do those sex education classes, we should be educated and empowered about how your hormones in your body works. Instead of leaving a class, you know, I think we do like 1 or 2 classes in sex education when I was at school anyway. And I think I remember they show you how to put a condom onto a banana and that's it. Basically, they don't teach you that there's such a short fertile window that you can actually fall pregnant. And, you know, just how the body actually works in general when it comes to reproductive health, it's really quite lacking. So yes, it's very infuriating.
Yeah, I don't even think we had the condom on the banana at my school. I
Oh,
went to
really?
all girls Catholic school. I think we had one little PE lesson and that was about it. But I'd love to touch on what you just said then about the fertile window, because that was one of the reasons I was on the pill for so long, was because I was like terrified of getting pregnant. So
Me
I
too.
think I remember saying to you as well that even when I was on the pill, if I had like a scare, I would take a morning after pill as well. So I was just flooding my body. So
Right.
I would love if you could touch on that fertile window for all of the people listening, because I feel like a lot of women don't understand that you can't get pregnant at all times of the
Yeah.
month.
Yeah, so this was the thing. This is probably the main, I guess, topic within this broader topic that really got me interested in educating women. So in this area, so what I never was taught at school, and it took me going to uni, which, you know, that's pretty later on in life to learn about how your body works and how the menstrual cycle works. But there's actually a really short fertile window. So within your cycle, so within the month, there's about a 6 to 7 day window, just to be careful, when you're actually fertile. So just to break that down a little bit, so basically the reason we say 6 to 7 days is 5 days before ovulation. If you have intercourse that's not protective, that sperm can actually survive for up to 5 days. So we need to be careful there. But then with ovulation, you actually only have a window of about 24 hours where that egg can be fertilized and you can conceive. So, you know, that's where we get this 5 to 6, you know, 7, really giving it a little bit of lenience, but, you know, 6 or 7 day window. So a lot of women don't realize that you cannot just fall pregnant at any given time during your cycle. A lot of women seem to be under the misconception that you can only not fall pregnant if you're on your period and having intercourse, which is actually not true. So yeah, it just depends on when you're ovulating. Most women with a normal 28-day cycle, normally it's around day 14 if we have a regular cycle. Obviously with most, or not most, but some women, that's not always the case where they're having regular cycles. And that's where we need to look more at natural alternates to actually figure out when that ovulation window is, or if it's actually happening. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That definitely blew my mind when I learned that. I just thought of all of those morning after pills I had taken out of being super paranoid throughout my life. And I was just thinking, oh my God, the damage I've probably done to my body taking these all the time, as well as the pill. So I know a lot of women are in the same boat with that. So just touching on that as well, the natural sort of alternatives to birth control. So if someone was wanting to come off of the pill and they wanted a more natural way to not get pregnant, what are some of the options that they have?
Yeah, so look, there's a bit of a range, to be honest. I guess I'll start with my most recommended, which is more a fertility awareness method. So, you know, your listeners can look this up. There's a lot of information out there now around this method, and it is a scientific approved one. So basically it involves looking at 3 different, I guess, concrete pillars that would tell you if you're ovulating or not. So number 1 is your body basal temperature, which you can measure orally. So you can do that. It has to be, you know, similar time each morning when you get up. So waking basal body temperature. if you're like me though, sometimes remembering to do that might be an issue. So you can actually buy, like, for example, Temp Drop. They're quite good. So they're like a little armband that you wear at night, and it will measure your basal body temperature for you. And then it graphs it into an app into your phone. So that's one aspect of it. With the fertility awareness method, it normally also asks you to document, I guess, your cervical mucus. So with your cervical mucus, when we ovulate, that changes. Does change. So basically with ovulation, it can become more like an egg white or egg, I guess like a raw egg white consistency. So basically, quite sticky, clear, and so it's a bit hard to explain. I don't know if we can get any pictures up or not, but yeah, just more like an egg white consistency. So that's another area that you'd be looking at. And then also with the positioning of the cervix as well. So normally the cervix sits fairly low, so about a finger's depth into the vaginal canal, but when we ovulate, it actually rises slightly and it becomes softer as well. So there's a few different things that we can do or pay attention to actually know when we're ovulating. But I mean, personally, I find even having that Temp Drop is so good. Like, it just really helps to mark out if you're ovulating, when you're ovulating. And just to come back to that as well, I probably didn't explain that very well, but with your basal body temperature, it spikes very slightly when you release an egg or just as you're ovulating, and it will remain high for a few days after. So it really helps to pinpoint exactly when your fertile window is. And obviously on top of that, you can, if you're wanting to be more careful, or if you're not, with a partner that you want to fall pregnant with or anything like that, condoms and using some sort of barrier protection as well. So that's one way of looking at it. I do have some women, and this is a touchy topic for me, I guess, but some of the women that I treat, they feel more comfortable using something like the Copper Iud, which, if you ask me, is sort of, it can potentially be the better out of a bad bunch. It's not something I necessarily recommend as a naturopath, but I do fully understand it can be quite a scary jump going from using the pill or the Mirena, something like that, and then having nothing and having to go just off of your body signs and trusting your body. So I mean, Copper IUD is sort of where some clients will turn to if they need that little bit more, safety in the way of how they're thinking about it. The Copper IUD is an interesting one though. Yes, it's not hormonal, but it does play with your hormones in a sense, especially with copper and how it can react. If you end up with a copper toxicity, for example, it can definitely play with hormones from that aspect and minerals. So yes, not my favorite choice, but just another little one to mention that there is a few different options out there like that as well.
Perfect. Yeah, I know the jump going from being on the pill to being on nothing can be very scary.
Yeah.
So that is a really good option for just all of the women listening to be able to explore, just to see what they would be most comfortable with.
Yeah.
I'd like to kind of backtrack to where we were talking about the hormonal imbalances as well. And I'd love to ask you, when you have patients who come in who are on any type of birth control and they have these really bad hormonal imbalances or these side effects, how do you usually treat them to kind of get their health back on track?
It's a bit of a tricky one. So do you mean, so if they can't come off the pill, for example?
Yeah. So if someone, just say for whatever reasons they can't come off of the pill, how would you sort of treat them to kind of optimize their reproductive health and balance their hormones?
Yeah, so there are some things we can do, or that I do with clients that, for they're not comfortable coming off the pill, which is totally fine. Or if for some reason they have to stay on it. So it does limit us a little bit with what we can do, but there's definitely things we can do. So I guess number one is, when we look at the oral contraceptive pill, one area that it does affect quite significantly, certain minerals. So when you take the oral contraceptive pill, it actually depletes certain minerals like your zinc, your magnesium, and your B6 quite significantly. That can really play with how you can create neurotransmitters in the body, like serotonin or dopamine, GABA, things that help you cope with stress, anxiety, depression. So when we have clients coming in that are needing support while they're on the pill, I'll often get them to supplement, a multivitamin that includes a good amount of those particular minerals. There's a few others that the pill does deplete as well. So they're just the main ones that I may be looking at. There's a few herbs that we can use. with the herbs, it's a little bit more tricky because obviously when we're using herbal medicine, it's more to balance the natural hormone production, which we don't want to do too much of if they're needing the hormones to be suppressed because they're on the pill. But in saying that, there are some herbs we can use that sort of work secondary. So working more on detoxification and clearance of synthetic hormones so that it's not lingering in the body longer than it needs to. So liver herbs, for example, like St. Mary's thistle is quite good, or rosemary can be quite good as well, just in moderation. Obviously, we don't want to be clearing too much of what the pill's doing if we need it there. And then, lifestyle stuff. There's so much you can do through diet and lifestyle to support your hormones in general, or just your reproductive health. There's so much there. I could go on about that for ages, but dietary stuff, eating breakfast, being careful with refined processed sugars, making sure you're getting protein and healthy fats with each meal, not skipping meals. Exercise is a really big one as well. I find a lot of women that come and see me, whether they're on the pill or not, if they come in and they're having problems with when their cycles may be going missing, so they're not getting periods very regularly, or if they've got irregular cycles, or breakthrough bleeding on the pill, things like that, it can often be linked in with one, chronic stress, which is a big one for lots of people, but also with internal stress that can come from over exercising or doing really intensive exercise. So often I'll get my clients to change up what they're doing and go more for yoga, nice brisk walks, swimming, Pilates, things like that, instead of the CrossFit, the HIIT classes, the real intensive exercises. And I find even doing those sorts of things can make quite a big impact on nutritional balance, how their gut functions, how they feel within themselves as well. So it can really help with the mood side of things. Libido, those sorts of symptoms, it's a little bit more hard to address that when it's more hormone related. But if it is more related to moods, then we can help in that area as well by addressing those things we just spoke about.
Amazing. I love that. I love the focus on health and nutrition as well, because I have definitely noticed in myself since seeing you, when we sort of isolated what nutritional things need to be fixed up, I noticed a lot of differences in my energy and in my mood, especially when I actually cut out caffeine. My energy has never been better. And I know that I'm currently not on any form of birth control, but I do think that would have had a huge effect when I was on the pill, because for me, I was just tired all the time. So I was having so much caffeine, having so much sugar. So I definitely feel like those dietary changes can be they can make a huge difference in the way that it affects your mood.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we look at it back with what I was saying about chronic stress, like so many of us, men and women, we're just so stressed the way that society has been built, I guess. It's just, 9 till 5. There's often kids involved as well when I'm treating a lot of women. So, people are very stressed, and it's to do with cortisol, which is that stress hormone that we secrete when we're in fight or flight mode. So I guess what I see a lot in clinic is, women getting stuck and not recognizing that they're in that fight or flight mode. So often they'll sort of present as very anxious, mood imbalances, poor sleep, things like that. So when we start addressing all these lifestyle factors like over drinking coffee or drinking coffee on an empty tummy, too much sugar, over exercising, it often allows me to start bringing that cortisol production back into a balance. So it's a way that we can sort of look at treating it without necessarily touching on hormones even, but just more supporting how the nervous system functions and how the gut functions and how we're able to absorb certain minerals for body processes that are really essential. So there's a few things that we can do there. Ideally, when we're working with herbal medicine, that's more where we're a little bit more limited. With those other things, we can definitely touch on that and see what we can do to help.
Great. I love that. Now, to go on the other side of the coin, just say if you had patients coming in who were having all of these problems and side effects and they wanted to come off the pill, if that was the option that you were going to take them on, how would you then treat those symptoms and side effects after you've taken them off the pill?
Yeah. So similar to what we just mentioned, I guess. So I guess if we've got free range and we're going, yep, we're coming off the pill, normally what I'll do is I'll make sure, if we can, that we've got at least the month before they come off the pill to try and really focus on gut health. And the reason I do that, and liver health, so detoxification, basically, the reason I do that is to make sure that when they do come off the pill, their detoxification processes are working really nicely so we can clear the pill fairly easily, as opposed opposed to having blockages and backups and, you know, not going to the bathroom daily, where we're not going to be able to eliminate a lot of these synthetic hormones. So that's really important if we can do that. Obviously, you know, there has been the case where I've had women coming in and they've researched and just started to learn about all these side effects, and they've started to possibly experience some of them, and they go, nope, I want it off. I want to stop it right now. And that's fine. Like, we can still work with that, but it's the same thing. We would always start with gut health, liver support. And then normally what I'd be doing is, I guess, obviously supporting the natural hormonal balance as well, and trying to almost wake the ovaries up again, because they often go into a bit of hibernation when they're not, you know, they're not needed, I guess, because we've got these synthetic hormones going in and flattening them. So it's a matter of then trying to wake those ovaries back up. So supporting the hormonal balance with herbal medicine, which as a naturopath is obviously one of my favorite ways of treating this sort of stuff. But yeah, herbs like peony and licorice is amazing. They're so good for balancing progesterone and estrogen. Depending what's going on as well, like if we've got a client that's come in and they've coming off the pill for, say, they're getting depression or mood imbalances, then it's very important that we support that area as well. So looking at those lifestyle techniques we spoke about earlier, as well as herbs that can support that. So passion flower, ashwagandha, magnolia. There's so many herbs that can support the neurotransmitter production and supporting cortisol as well. So yeah, I guess that's a couple of little ways that we'd go about it. It's very individual, I guess, because it really depends on what's going on for that individual woman. But just as a little bit of a basic overview, that's sort of how I would be looking at approaching it, as well as supporting those mineral deficiencies. So looking at minerals to boost up, where they're going deficient from being on the pill.
Great. And how does the actual process of coming off of the pill work? Like, how would you do that in a way that is best suited to maintaining the health of that person?
Yeah, so I really strongly advise not to just stop cold turkey through the month. So normally what I get my clients to do, if they're feeling like they're comfortable and ready to come off the pill, I'll ask them if they're okay with it to finish the month. So you'd get to that, I guess, the end stage of the pill where you start the white pill or the sugar pill, and you don't take that sugar pill basically. So you let that bleed come through, which is normally just a breakthrough, pill bleed. And then what we do is we really monitor over the next month if we have another bleed within that month. That's normally that first period coming through. Touch wood or fingers crossed for those women, it comes naturally about 28 days or, the 3 weeks later after they've had that last bleed. But sometimes that's not always the case. So rule of thumb, most women I treat within 1 to 3 cycles or months after we've come off the pill, we can normally get things fairly regular. Obviously, that's not always the case because there could be some underlying hormonal imbalances that were never addressed before the pill. And one in particular is PCOS. I see that a lot in clinic, endometriosis as well. And I guess just to cover that quickly, like a lot of the time when we go on the pill, it can suppress or make these symptoms of PCOS or endo feel like they've gone away, but often they're just being, I guess, silenced until we rip that Band-Aid off, and then we have to actually deal with this thing that has generally become worse than when we first went on the pill. So then we'd obviously look at those areas as well.
Great. That's very fascinating.
Yeah.
I really wish I kind of would have known that when I came off the pill, because I believe I saw you after I decided to just go cold turkey, and I literally just did the cold turkey halfway through. Definitely didn't do it that way.
Yeah, no, it's always better to try, and it helps to, it does help a little bit with trying to maintain some sort of balance to an aspect so that it's not a complete shock to your system. Whether we like it or not, it is a bit of a shock to the system when we do stop the pill, whether it's mid-cycle or at the end of the cycle. But I've just noticed it does help with a lot of women when we do manage to just finish that course and then, start fresh with the next month without the pill. Yeah. Unfortunately, yes, for you, I think.
Yes. Not as big of a shock to the body.
Yes. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So if a woman did decide to come off the pill, what are some things that they can expect? Those first sort of 6 to 12 months after coming off of the pill, what can they expect from that?
Yeah. So again, it's very different for everyone. It really depends on what's going on in that person's body and what was underlying before the pill, and genetics, things like that. But some of the common things I see, and I guess the one that a lot of women really worry about, or two things that women really worry about, is if their period's going to come back and if it's going to be regular. So that's a big thing for a lot of women. Secondly is acne. So obviously that's something that I see a lot in clinic as well. Post-pill acne is a bit of a bugger. It's it's one of those things. It's your body's way of detoxing through the skin, unfortunately, especially if the liver and the bowel aren't working as well as potentially they could do, then sometimes it can come through the skin and it can play with your natural cerebrum production. So basically when we go on the pill, a lot of women will go, oh, my skin clears. But the thing is what it's doing, it's suppressing those hormones that actually naturally balance your cerebrum production. So it's stopping the oil secretion in your skin, which sounds good, but it actually isn't, because it's reflecting, I guess, what would be happening in the way of hormones and the cerebrum production in a child. So, I mean, that in itself just doesn't sound right. So
no, not at all.
So there's a few things there. And then obviously with those nutritional deficiencies of things like zinc, that can play a really big role with that hormonal acne and skin health as well. Other than that, I mean, PMS is a big one as well. Some women, if they've not experienced mood imbalances while they're on the pill, sometimes there are women that when they come off the pill, there could have been PCOS or some sort of hormonal imbalance lingering from prior to the pill. And that can often come about. I find more so with ovulation. So there'll be, I know it's PMS as in premenstrual, but it's almost the same thing, but around ovulation for some of these women. It's something I'm noticing a lot at the moment in clinic. So anyway, so there's ways that we go about starting to balance that up. And I often find it can happen because the hormones get a really big spike around ovulation and then quite a severe drop, instead of it being just a nice little up and down. It's more like a really big spike and drop. So it can really play with how these women feel within themselves, especially with anxiety. So sometimes that can be there, but again, we can normally balance these things out using lifestyle stuff, supporting the liver to clear that synthetic steroid from the pill, and topping up nutritional deficiencies as well to support the neurotransmitter production for mental health.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting as well, as I always think, these things that kind of can happen when you stop taking the pill. It's more so just a testament to all the things that the pill was blocking and masking, and just how bad the pill actually is for us if it does cause these problems after.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, I always think about that because I know that I've been seeing you for the post-pill acne, which is something that I've had an issue with since coming off of the pill. But every time I see the acne and I get a bit frustrated with it, all I think of is, wow, if this is what the pill has done to me, like after coming off of it, imagine what it was doing to my body while I was on it.
Yeah, it's scary to think about. And I was the same, like when I, even until, like recently, even like I'll still get hormonal breakouts. Like the hormonal breakouts are pretty common, but in saying that, it's so aggravated when you come off the pill. It's just like this it can be very angry, very inflamed. And it's very interesting because for some women, I find that it can be okay for the few months after they come off the pill, but then it can all of a sudden hit you.
Yeah.
And
that was in my case.
And I had the same experience. So it's very frustrating dealing with hormonal acne, and it can be very stubborn. And as you know, it can take a little while for it to clear, but it's a very true indication of where those hormones were sitting potentially underneath that pill. And now we've got to actually process and work with it to clear it, rather than just using a pill that we take every day to suppress everything. It's just not the right answer, I don't feel anyway.
No, I agree. I feel like it's like you'd rather treat the root cause of the problem rather than just slap a Band-Aid on it, which is what I personally believe the pill is.
Yeah, no, very true.
And
you're right.
Oh no, you go, sorry.
Oh, you're right. I was just going to say something that I often, it's just something I haven't mentioned, with a lot of my clients when we're coming off the pill, more so when we've come off the pill, within the few months that we've come off the pill, I'll get them to do a whole range of blood testing as well. So this can really help to pinpoint exactly what's going on for that individual. So that can really help with subsiding quite a few of these side effects that we can get when we come off the pill. So, things like testing cortisol levels, for example, to see where their stress hormones are sitting, or checking where their hormones are sitting a couple, 2 or 3 months after they come off the pill, so we can get a really true reading for what they might be lacking. Or for example, if there's PCOS, we can look to see where their testosterone levels are sitting, if their cortisol is high, if there's high insulin, mineral deficiencies, things like that. So there's lots we can do to try and prevent some of these things from surfacing. So there's definitely options there as well.
No, I love that. It's very, very informative. I know a lot of my listeners I think their minds will be a bit blown right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's just sad it's not, I hope one day it'll be integrated more into schooling systems so that young girls and young women are actually empowered and can connect more with their body instead of being, I guess, veered to fear it. So yeah, as me and you have both experienced, really fear-based. Yeah, it's very sad. So it's nice to see that more women are starting to look at the different options they've got.
Yeah, and it's great. And that's why I'm so appreciative of you coming on today, because I just think education is so important around these topics. And then people can just make informed consent, because that is the most important thing.
It is. And that's what it comes down to, really. Like in my opinion, there is no informed consent if you're not given the full picture of what you're actually putting into your body. And this very dated, I guess, system of women having, like there's millions of women on this thing. It's not just a one-off, prescription. So many women are on it and have no idea about what it's actually doing in their body or the potential side effects. So it is a real lack of informed consent. So I do wonder how many of these women would actually be on it if they were aware of these potential side effects and what it might be doing.
No, if I had known beforehand, I definitely wouldn't have been on it. And even with the post-pill acne that I've got, I still would not choose to go back on it. Like I've had people have told me, just go on Roaccutane to treat it, or go back on the pill to treat the acne. And I just think that in the grand scheme of things, like this may take a little bit of time to heal, but it is so not worth putting all of these chemicals back into my body.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. Hey, like as a society, I think we've become so used to a quick pill to fix things instead of understanding that, these symptoms are ways of your body going, hey, there's something out of balance here, or there's something not quite right. And then addressing those things, which can take time, skin healing even in itself can take time. So it is a process, and I understand it's a frustrating one, but I guess when you get to the other side of it, it's really rewarding when you've not had to turn to that pill, or the Roaccutane's a big one that gets prescribed. I even had one of my clients, she's a close friend as well, though, actually today messaged me saying same thing, she's come off the pill, she's really being so good with taking everything, but just that acne is really I guess frustrating for her. So same thing, dermatologist has just recommended Roaccutane, and they unfortunately just hand it out like candy. So it's the same thing then about that lack of education around what that actually does in the body. Yeah, and often it sort of still leaves you back at square one when you stop these things. So it'd be amazing if you could take it once and it gets rid of it. Amazing, but it's just not, unfortunately, doesn't work like that.
No, and it just brings you back to square one, and we want something for the long term.
Exactly. Yeah.
So speaking of long term as well, for long-term health benefits, what are some sort of everyday things that women could do that you would recommend to do to just kind of keep their hormones balanced and their reproductive health very healthy?
Yeah, I mean, what I was mentioning earlier in the way of lifestyle, so lifestyle and dietary suggestions. So normally when I'm dealing with hormones, one of the biggest things I find is that a lot of women, they're so busy, they're on the go, and they often, might not be hungry or might not have time for breakfast. So that's probably a really big one, is making sure that we're eating breakfast. Ideally, we want to try and get something that's not sugary and full of dairy. So we want to try and get something that's got a nice healthy protein, some healthy fats, and some nutrient content to it. So for example, even things like some nice gluten-free oats with berries and some hemp seeds that have lots of protein, and some almond and coconut milk. You can do overnight oats, so it's nice and easy. You can do protein shakes as well, but I normally just suggest, I'm just personally not a big fan of cow's dairy. I see it causes a lot of problem in a lot of my clients. So I normally say avoid the whey proteins and go more for plant-based that have the enzymes in there as well. If you just look on the back of the packets, you'll be able to see that. But yeah, nice protein shakes that are based on, again, the almond and coconut milk. You can throw some nice berries in there, a little bit of banana, just some things to sort of bulk it up a little bit more. So making sure you're having breakfast. Another thing as well, we were talking about coffee. That's a really big one with hormones. So not having coffee on an empty tummy is probably one of the number one things as well. So if you are drinking coffee, try and keep it to one a day and always have it with food. So I normally recommend just with brekkie, not too late on in the day either. And the reason being is, and again, we've probably already spoken about this, but just briefly, when we have caffeine on an empty tummy, it will spike your blood cortisol, which is that stress hormone again. So when your body is, running on cortisol, it's running on fight or flight mode. So it's literally thinking there's a tiger about to jump out on it. So while we're in that fight or flight mode, your body cannot balance hormones, and it can't, digest food properly. It's like if we hear bad news, you can feel it in your tummy. It's that connection. So we want to try and reduce that cortisol response. So doing those things like not drinking the coffee on an empty tummy, not over exercising, not, and I understand not getting stressed is very easily said than done, but managing stress where we can, at least, to try and reduce that cortisol secretion, that can really make quite a big difference with starting that process of balancing hormones and neurotransmitters.
I love that. Yeah, I think the fasting one is definitely a huge thing, because I feel like we're all sort of told to get on this, health hub of fasting. But I know from what I've looked into it, there haven't been many studies done on women's bodies with fasting, only on men's bodies.
Yes, that's a very good point. It's very true. And I mean, look, I'm not completely against fasting. It's mainly in the mornings. I would say strongly disagree. Like don't go fasting in the mornings, especially for women, obviously, with hormonal balance and what we've been speaking about. With fasting, it's more, I actually reckon if you are going to do fasting, do it at night. So, stopping your last meal from 5:30, 6 o'clock, that's no worries with me, because it gives your body chance to actually digest before you get into bed, so that your body can work on healing. And then, making sure you're having breakfast sort of no later than 9 o'clock if you can. So it's not a huge window for fasting, but if you're wanting to do a little bit of it, that's a way you could do it without sort of interfering negatively with your hormones.
That is great. Thank you. I think that's given everyone a lot of information to take away. I think I've even learned a lot of new things today as well, which I'll definitely be implementing. I just really want to thank you for coming on this podcast today. I've been wanting to have you on for a while, and we finally made it happen.
Yes.
For everyone listening, this is Hannah's first podcast as well, and I think you absolutely killed it.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, if anyone listening does want to get in touch with Hannah or book in an appointment with her on the Gold Coast, I will leave her details in the podcast description. But that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for coming on, Hannah. I really appreciate it.
No, that's fine. It's nice to chat about these things.
Yeah. And that is all for now. So I will see you all in the next episode.